we're talking about consumer behavior, and last time we talked about Maslow hierarchy of needs. The idea is that there's different level of needs and motivation, and therefore people, when they buy a product, they buy it for different reasons. Either buying it for physiological reasons, or they're buying it for some social reasons, or they're buying it for some personal reasons. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that when we look at making a purchase, we're looking at products and we have different level of perceptions depending on our past experience and depending on how we perceive the product that we're about to buy. So the past experience are going to influence us because we'll be looking for what we know. And if we don't find what we know, therefore we'll assume that it's not as good. The other thing is we may have had a past experience that was recent, past experience that was a long time ago. We may have different way to look at things as well, with personal interest in what we're looking for. So therefore, perceptions are very biased, and you have to be very careful in making sure that the perception your product is giving is the one that your target is willing to buy. So then there's the issue about how much change you want to have and how much improvements and benefits you want to have on the product. So there's the absolute threshold, which is the lowest level at which an individual can experience a sensation. So if a product is a little bit better, it's a new product, how much will people respond? So there is the minimum amount that you want, so it's like, it's a iPhone 10. What's the difference between the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 12? If there's not enough difference, people are not going to buy the 12. The fact that with time, we take things for granted. So there's some kind of adaptation. We get used to what the product does, and there is the wow effect, the surprise effect keeps going down. So that's also very important. And then there's a differential threshold, which is how much difference do you want people to perceive between the two? So this is called the cherry on the cake. The idea is the cherry on the cake is you create a new product, and therefore you think about the minimum elements you should have, and what are the elements that you want to have in addition in order to increase people's desire to want to buy the product. So looking at this, it's called a just noticeable difference. So it's a very important concept, which is you need to be better than your previous products, and you need to be better than your competitors. What can you do in order to be perceived as better? Yes, Mary.
That's so interesting. Like, I was thinking about cheesecakes. Like right now, when I go to the Cheesecake Factory and I'm selecting a cheesecake, they have two different ones. There's the regular cheesecake, and there's a regular cheesecake with just the strawberry on top. And that costs more, and people will buy the one just because there's strawberry on top.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, so that could be that, or it could be that they say it's gluten-free, or it could be that they say they're using fair trade chocolate. So if you say that you're using fair trade chocolate, does it make it better? For some people it does, and for some people it doesn't. So in 10 years ago, I was running a franchise, a bakery franchise. And so I was lucky to have a friend that was a big investor, and he invested into a bakery franchise, and he asked me to run it. And I was looking for a better cheese. So the best cheese came from overseas. The cheese in America was good, but I couldn't find something that was really impressive. So I looked for better cheese, and so I was buying it from overseas. But at one stage, I wanted to be American and not being, again, buying all this cheese coming from Europe or France in particular. So I kept looking for better cheese, and what I found is that there were Amish people in Pennsylvania that were making cheese the same way as the cheese that was made 400 years ago in Europe. So I tried their cheese, it was fantastic. So then I started buying the cheese from the Amish people who live in Pennsylvania. So all my product that cheese inside had fantastic cheese made in America by Amishes. And I thought this was great, but nobody cared. They like fair trade of cheese made somewhere else, but the fact that it was made by Amishes, there was nobody cared for Amishes in America. It's not like a minority that people are caring for. So therefore, there was no gain beside the fact that cheese was really good, but it was just noticeable from a quality of the product, but not from the story. So it made no difference. So the cheese was much more expensive. In addition, I had to find my own little system. So I had to buy the cheese, but it was complicated because I couldn't communicate with the Amishes using Hotmail or the internet or Instagram or whatever you wanted. And so I had to use UPS, and it was a complicated system. So there were so many things I had to do. I had to give up on that. But it was something I was trying to do just noticeably different. So you have to find constantly the threshold every time you create a new product is what you're going to leave the same and what you're going to change. In fact, I found interesting that for 2021, the different governments try to have an incentive, a just noticeable difference incentive, in order to incentivize, stimulate people to get the vaccine. So in America, they were giving free rifles and free shotguns. So it's very specific to America. So if you were getting vaccinated, you could get draw to get a free gun. In Thailand, a different country, they didn't give free guns, they gave a free cow. So you would get a free cow. And in Hong Kong, you would get a free apartment. So I thought interesting from the fact that different culture would have different incentives in order to get people interested, motivated to be getting COVID-19. So there was like the people that were motivated to get COVID-19, but they needed a just noticeable difference, something else. It's like, I get the vaccine, I don't get the vaccine. Oh, there's a free gun. Okay, I get the vaccine. So that was for the American, free guns. Free cows for the Thai, and a free apartment. Obviously, you say, my God, there's a big difference of incentives between these countries. It's interesting that one, there's a difference of incentives, and two, there's a huge difference in terms of the size of the incentives. Obviously, they didn't give as many, I'm guessing, this is just a guess. I don't think they gave as many guns as they gave apartments in Hong Kong. You know, there was probably a smaller statistical chance to get the apartment than there was to get a gun. And if you're interested to read about this, you can find this from mainstream media that talk about it, NBCnews.com, CNN.com, and the New York Times.com. They actually talk about these different incentives that are given in different countries in order to be a just noticeable difference for people to want to get vaccinated. There you have three shoes. So three shoes that at the end of the day, to me, they look very similar, but there's one difference. What's the difference? One has 3 bands, one has 2 bands, and one has 4 bands. So if you ask someone, which one is the best? Which one do you think they're gonna say?
The middle one?
The middle one. The middle one, because the middle one is 3 band, which means it's Adidas. Now, if it has 2 band, who knows what it is? And obviously 2 is less than 3, so you may as well get 3. But then you can also get the 4 band. So the 4 band is more band. Same price, more band, maybe you get 4 band. But does the band make the shoe better? What makes a shoe? The number of band on the side? If you can make people believe that one makes a shoe better is the number of bands on the side, then you're a champion, and why not using it and then have more bands? Just noticeable difference do not have to be real. Just noticeable difference have to be real in the eye of the buyer. So that was another thing that was very interesting that Dan Pena said. And we didn't comment on that, but it's huge. But you have to have had the experience of this, and not many of you may get the experience, at least in the short term, but when you run a business, oftentimes you have to deal with engineers. And if you run projects, you have to deal with engineers. When the engineers describe what is the just noticeable difference, it's often very, very different than what the consumer perceives to be the just noticeable difference. So the engineers are oftentimes focusing on some element of difference, which are closer to trying to make things perfect, versus consumers. What they see as perfection is very different than the engineers, and it's oftentimes very simple. It's simpler, and it's oftentimes more pragmatic, and there's no searching for what is right or what is wrong. Like here, what is right and what is wrong? No band, 1 band, 2 band, 3 band, 4 band, 6 band, 20 band. There's no right or wrong. It's just what the customer wants. So what the customer wants is right. What the engineer wants is not right. It's what the customer wants that is right. So that's the way of thinking as a marketer for the most part. However, sometimes you have to be disruptive. So disruptive, which is that you have to do something that the customers don't want, or at least they don't realize that they want. And once it's available, then they realize that they want it, but they never thought of it. So that's what's very difficult is to use a big number and to make it simple. 99% of the time, give the people what they want. And 1% of the time, so it's very rare, is do not give what they want, but give what the engineer and you think they would want once they know. But there's more risk in doing this because people are risk averse. People follow fashion and trends and what's popular. So sometimes it's not what's good for them that they're going to buy, but what's popular that they're going to buy because they are sort of blind to the reality of the quality of things. They are more following, what people want. So an example of this is the STEM player a good thing? Well, it's a good thing because Kanye West decided to sell it, but he made it available just for 1 hour, and it was first come, first serve. And that's the only way to sell something for $200, because obviously, if you ask people if they want to buy music for $200, they tell you no. But if you make it popular, suddenly they want it for $200 because they don't want to miss out, and they want to buy it, hoping maybe that they can flip it and sell it for more because it becomes something more exclusive. And there's also the bragging rights of being able to say that you have it and being the first. And life could be boring, and maybe that makes it more exciting and so forth. So you sell it for a lot of money. You make it very elitist and available just for a short period of time. And you make it sound like it's high technology, and you get people to have a new toy because people are looking for new things because they're somewhat bored. So marketers are in this shoes of taking leadership, of making sure people are not bored, and you keep them entertained. Like, people are kids, and you need to take care of those kids so that way they can keep being entertained, having and wanting to buy new gimmicky things. Any comments? Okay, no comments. Maybe I'm starting to sound like Dan Pena, and you don't want to comment anymore. Okay, sorry. So the just noticeable difference is very important, and we are surrounded of just noticeable difference. What's important in business? Number one, understanding the concept of opportunity. What is changing in the world can we take advantage of? Last class, I realized that there was something really good that we talked about. What would be the opportunity for A2 milk? Is there an opportunity for A2 milk? Well, yes, there's an opportunity for A2 milk because it's kind of crazy, but there's more and more wealthy people, super mega wealthy people, and they also want to buy their milk. What milk can they buy? I actually searched. I don't know if you did that. Anyone search for what kind of milk could they buy if you're very wealthy? Anyone discovered something?
I think there was mention from the librarian. She mentioned about the like kind of door, like you know how there used to be milkmen back in the days, Professor. They provided milk, from literally from farm to your door, in a sense. I guess like in glass bottles and stuff. And I think that's kind of what a lot of these like high end, I guess you can say even milks are being sold as, in a sense, for like the elite, talk about like elitist type, luxury branded milk. Usually they're in glass bottles, and they're also labeled, with grass fed, all that stuff, all these. So
yes.
In terms of a particular brand, I don't think there is one that I could think of. I gotta actually look for a name.
Yeah. So what I found is I did a little research, and I made actually a PowerPoint slide, but I can't find it anymore. So I made a little PowerPoint slide that shows that there's more and more wealthy people. That's an opportunity, and that they're spending more and more their money on things that are extremely expensive. If it's not extremely expensive, they don't believe it's real. So you wouldn't want to try to sell this for $15 or $20 because they would not buy it. It would have to be much more than this. So when I kept on looking, I found that there's a few companies that try to make glass bottles that were a little bit fancier, and they look sort of more vintage, more than they looked expensive. So that's not what we're talking about. We're not trying to make it look vintage, like the good old days of the glass bottle. Because I think it should look very expensive. And so when I looked at that, I found a lot of products for the water. And in fact, I remember there was one, it was called Beverly Hills Water. And that was what, $50,000 a bottle or whatever. I can't find it. I made the PowerPoint slide, but I have no idea where I put it.
Oh yeah, that was actually another point too, Professor, I was gonna make, is like there's like very like niche kind of like type of milk from certain like particular animals. Like there's a comment about camel milk. I actually looked it up right now too. Like if you talk about like sheep's milk or particular goat's milk, or even like from like a particular animal from a very particular region in so like those type of like very niche milks would definitely like
there's some niche.
Yeah.
There's some niche milk. So the opportunity is people are spending more money. And I mean, Rolls-Royce and Bentley have never sold as many cars as last year. That's the record, and it's 2 times more than the previous record. And then water is a commodity, and this is what I found. There's a Beverly Hills 90H2O water. So for a bottle of 750 is $100,000 a bottle. I mean, that's expensive for most people. Then the second one is Acqua di Cristallo, 60,000, Kona Nigari, 400, Filico Waters, Varladi. So there's a bunch of them that are actually made in America, like Bling H2 water at $40 a bottle of water. So then I was thinking, could this be also made for the milk, since they're buying such expensive water? And I believe there is an opportunity because people are spending more. So it's a question of finding who are these people and what are they drinking right now, and would they want to drink more expensive? So I researched and I found nothing beside in Japan. In Japan, there's actually a brand of milk, and I should have copied and pasted here, but it's called like a Nishimata milk or whatever. And it's a milk which comes from specific cows, not every cow, specific cow in a specific area of Japan, which receive a very specific treatment. They get massaged, they get all kinds of things, and they get milked for a very short time at dawn. So it's like 30 minutes at dawn. So the production is very limited, and this milk is purchased by adults. So the bottle is like $100 bottle, $200 bottle. And what this milk does is relaxes people because there's a high content of protein and melatonin. So I'm not saying this is true. This is how they sell it. This is the just noticeable difference, is this milk has a lot of melatonin. and therefore you will sleep like a baby. So all of these adults who live in cities in Japan who are very stressed, so we're not talking about 100,000, we're talking about millions of people, they can drink their milk and gain from this milk and sleep like a baby at night. And they love this milk. This milk is being very successful in all this. I guess it must be working for people to keep buying it. It can't be just psychological. Yes, there was Ong Chong. You had your hand up just 10 seconds ago.
Oh, yes. So I was just going to add in with the Japanese culture too, like they, with food and like produce, or I guess in produce you mentioned, like you're mentioning, they consider like a lot of foods, like high-end foods as gift. They actually give them as gift, like they have their melons or strawberries and stuff. So I can see that even like, you know, a particular like very specific type of milk that has those benefits could be very marketable as a, you know, as a very niche product as well too. So yeah.
Yes, very true. And I'm thinking even like, you know, they sell so much French water in the USA. Why not selling French milk? I'm just using an example, but if it has to be New Zealand, or if it has to be, since A2 milk is originally from New Zealand, you know, is there a cachet? Is there some kind of benefits? You know, like, you know, maybe they'll come from the Alps or something, milk from the Alps, from very attractive farms that look like a fairy tale type of farm, where the cows are like groomed, and it would be like a specific race of a breed. Like you see, for example, on this milk does not exist. The one I have the picture, it does not exist. So what is this? This is a company, this is a student like you who competed for design. It's a design student. And then the students had the idea of making a fancier packaging. So since it's a packaging design student, he just designed something that he thought was more attractive than what exists. So I thought, geez, this is a start. And you can see on the bottle, it says Guernsey. Guernsey is an island, it's a tiny island, minuscule island that is very upscale. I mean, it's an island where pretty much all the billionaires have their money there. I mean, it's an island that is mostly used for tax evasion by the very, very wealthy people. And it's between France and UK. And it's an island actually that's very next to France. I never understood that, but it actually belongs to the United Kingdom. So I guess that's a remnant from some war between the French and the English, probably from Napoleon time or whatever. So that island, which is tiny, it's in the north of Normandy. That could be the idea, is you find a very quaint island with some very special cows, and they will have a system for the milk, and people will buy this milk because it couldn't be, you know, it's a little bit like goat milk. It's hard to mass produce goat milk. Yes, Erica.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe there's a difference in quality of output of the milk, like taste, when you take in consideration like the differences in quality of water or the feed that the cows are eating. So I don't know, maybe that's something else.
Of course, and that's a very good point, because the idea is that you know, you wouldn't want to sell milk which is inferior, you know, having added water in there, tap water, pretending it's better, and make even more money because you've been ripping off people. I don't think that's the way to go. I think the way to go, and it's just one, I'm not telling you what to do, it's just, you know, here you start the A2 milk project. What are the students going to do? I don't have an answer sheet. This is not a simulation, a computer simulation. This is a real project. So I'm like, what are you going to do? I don't know, but I'm thinking what could be done. And last week when we talked about this, I thought of it afterwards, is the opportunity is more and more people are with a huge amount of money, and there's absolutely no option. No, it's not like there's alpha option. There's zero option for milk for the rich. There's just nothing like that. So maybe the milk for the rich, it's the, you know, I don't know, pistachio fiber milk or something like that, you know. There's almond milk. Maybe you can make it from something that is very hard to make milk with. But what's the gain of pistachio? I think, but that's why you need to do the research to see if there's an opportunity for very wealthy people to want to find out in their head, where could the milk come from that it makes them think that it's better? I mean, it's milk from Monaco or whatever. Maybe milk from Monaco. Yeah, Monte Carlo, Monaco milk. Yeah, something like this. Whatever it takes, they have in their head some kind of, so it could be Switzerland, it could be Austria, in the States, could be Aspen, Aspen milk. Yeah, Aspen, Vale. I mean, I don't think you can do South Beach milk because that's kind of like,
You could
doesn't
add
make any
gold.
sense.
You could add gold flakes to it. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They did this for some vodka, whatever, and people bought it because they thought, oh, there's gold flakes. It's true. But you see, what happened is you should not be saying, let's add some gold flakes and see what happens. If you do it right, is you should say, here are the things that we have just noticeable difference for. A, it's from Aspen. B, it has gold flakes. C, it's made by a cow that is almost extinct. Which one has the best just noticeable difference? The gold flakes. Perfect. We'll put gold flakes. What matters is not what you think is good or what you think is wrong, is what the consumer think is good or is wrong. And it's all based not on an ID, it's based on a consumer response to the ID. So there's no good or bad ID. There's only responses. If the consumer says 5 band is better than 4 band, 5 band. That's what we're gonna have, 5 band. So I think this is just one opportunity, is making expensive milk. I don't think that's what you should all be doing, but I wanted to bring it up because, but now we are the 8th of March, at least there is something you can do. And I just told you that's something that can be done. So you're not lost and confused in terms of what could we do. I gave you one opportunity that you could be working from. Consumers, when they buy, they go through the decision making, which is first they recognize there's a need, then they look for information, then they evaluate between the alternatives, then they buy or not buy the product, and then they think about, are they satisfied or not satisfied to buy again. There's different type of consumers. There's the one that buy first. They're called the innovators, and that's a very small percentage, less than 5%, who are going to be creating the first wave of consumers, which are going to sort of create the trend for the early adopters and early majority, which are then going to create the wave for the last group, which is the late majority, and eventually the product will be phased out and there will be only the laggards that will be buying the product. So when you look at consumer behavior, you also have the behavior of the buyers from an organization perspective. From an organization perspective, it's very similar. As you have first the new task of buying. So it's like you've never bought. So that's the one that has the most steps. And then you have the modify rebuy. So there's a 1% modification or a 10% modification. So you only talk about what's different. And then the straight rebuy. So you bought 15 HP photocopy machine model HP 2410. Now you want to buy 30 of these. So 2 times what you bought before. This is a straight rebuy. Now you would want to buy the model above this because you want to increase the speed. All you want to do is increase the speed, so nothing else. So that's a modify rebuy. We want to buy now not 15, but 30, but all we want to do is faster printing, modify rebuy. And then new task buying is now we want to buy some scanner. It's different. Before we had printer that we are doing also scanning, but now we want bigger scanners and we don't want to buy too many, but just one very good scanner. So it's a new task. So businesses have different, the difference between a business buying and a consumer buying is there's more structure. It's more formal, okay? So that's why, therefore, you see it within these 3 possible the situation. there's more people involved also in the purchase behavior, because as a consumer, it may be just you, or if you're a family, maybe you, your parents, or you and your spouse. In a business, you will have the person that is in charge of making the purchase. So maybe it's administrative people. And then you will have the person which is in charge of making the decision of what we're going to buy. And then you also have the person that will create the funds. So the funds may be the owner that decides if they're going to buy or not buy. The decider is the person that's going to make the choice at the end of what they're going to buy, because they are maybe the responsible person for the purchases, or maybe even the maintenance. And then you have the person that is just going through the process, maybe in the accounting department, of issuing the check and making the purchase order and so forth. And then you have other people, maybe the people that use the product are going to have some ownership in the decision. And you may have some people that are the one servicing and doing the maintenance, and that's all they do, and they will have some importance in the decision making as well. So multiple roles, more people involved is usually the case of a business making purchases. Now, this becomes more complicated the bigger the business. Bigger business have more structure. So when you look at consumers, you have fewer stages. There is a problem, they're looking for a solution, they're looking for information, they make decisions. When you look at the stage of the decision buying process for a business, is you have more stages. I'm not going to ask you in the quiz, how many stages are in the consumer process? 5, 4, 6, 8, 9, and then how many stages are in the. That's because that depends on the textbook, to tell the truth, because some textbooks go into more detail within stages, and then you end up with more rectangles, if you want. What needs to be remembered is that there are more stages. It's again more formal when you look at the decision making of a business. So it starts the same and it sort of ends the same, but the difference is it's more formal. So in both cases, there is some kind of problem. Therefore, there is a need to look for a solution. But then when you look for a solution as a consumer, is you just look for solutions that are essentially the one that takes the least work, depending on the commitment and the involvement and how expensive, if it's pencils versus, building a swimming pool, it's going to be different. Building a swimming pool, you don't build swimming pool very often, usually when you are an individual, and when you're a business, maybe the same thing if you're a hotel. So versus pencils, it's much lighter. So there's different involvement in what you're buying in the decision process. The more involvement and the more expensive is what you're going to buy, the more steps you will be using, and the least expensive and therefore the least involved, the least step you're going to be using. It's possible that something that is not very expensive, you will go from needing the product and then buying the product without looking for alternatives. But if it's something that is very expensive and you buy in large volumes, you will look for alternatives. This being true for a consumer and this being true also for a business. But a business, and a large business even more so, will try to create, as a second stage here, the need for this some kind of description of what you need. And then another report that will talk about the product specification, because they're going to try to formalize what is the problem, what do you need it for, and what the product needs to have. Because then there's a supplier search. So you look for the various supplier, and in fact, in the supplier search, is you may even have some kind of communication, like a public bid, where you would publish through the media, through the news, that you are looking for something. You're looking for, 500 computers, you're looking for large quantity of furniture, you're looking for someone to build a road, something that you need that requires you to make a public announcement for businesses to come, for suppliers to come and say, I can do this. And then there will be a review of the suppliers and then a purchase order. Obviously, if it's a new task, modify, rebuy, a straight rebuy, a new task will go from the problem to the purchase. If it's a modification, it will go from the problem to general need description, product specification, and it will be simpler to do because you won't go into a lot of depth. You talk about just the modification. But if it's a new task, this is when you have to go through all of these stages. So the bigger the business, the bigger the expenditure, and the more it's a new task, the more you have to go through all these formal steps. And the more you're a consumer buyer, the less you will go into steps and make decisions just by yourself. So this concludes the elements on consumer behavior. Consumer behavior is, there's a lot of information in there. The next and final subject that I want to talk about is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Segmentation, targeting, and positioning is very related to consumer behavior in the sense that you have to use the elements of consumer behavior in order to understand what's segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So the acronym for that is STP. STP is very, very important. And we sort of discussed a lot about things that have to do with STP without me telling you that this is about STP. STP is sort of the necessity for businesses to be successful because you cannot be everything to everyone. So what you do is you go through 3 stages. Stage 1 is segmenting, stage 2 is targeting, and stage 3 is positioning. Segmentation and targeting are connected. They have to be done in that exact order. It has to be S and T. Positioning could be done before, so it could be PST or STP, but it could not be TSP or TS. It's always segmenting before you target. So what does segmenting mean? Segmenting means dividing, breaking down people in different groups. Targeting means taking those different groups and regrouping them. It's putting them together. So a segment is a single characteristic, such as culture, East Coast, West Coast, old and young, white collar, blue collar. So all of these are that you've learned before for consumer behavior, that we discussed before for consumer behavior, is to understand and predict consumers based on their differences, but to be used inside segmentation and targeting. So learning consumer behavior is interesting, but what's the application of what you learn in consumer behavior? The application is in STP. So you cannot divide consumer behavior from segmenting and targeting. S and T is the application of the information that you learn in consumer behavior. So it's 2 chapters, 2 subjects, which are divided, but they need one another because to do STP, you need to understand consumer behavior. So without going again into what's consumer behavior, but consumer behavior is essentially a group, a number of characteristics that the consumers have that allow you to understand that they are not all the same. And therefore, each one of these differences makes a segment difference. Then targeting is grouping these differences. So differences in terms of where you live, your age, how you think, and how you behave, all of these create different segments. So what could we use to segment? Can we use occupation? Being a student, is that a characteristic to divide people? Yes, it is. Could being married being a characteristic? Yes, it is. Could different income be a characteristic to divide? Of course. Could different age? Yes. Could different gender? Yes. Could different benefits? Very much so. So benefits are some of the most important. It's like, I buy toothpaste because of fresh breath. That's the benefit. So fresh breath is a characteristic of segmentation. All the people that buy toothpaste for fresh breath are here. And then you have another group, which is another reason. When you look at the other group, you may say, what are the other reasons? And then you find that there's some people is for teeth whitening. Another person may be for decay prevention. So these are different benefits. And each one of these benefits, or people desire to focus on one benefit, makes a segment. So segmenting is difficult. Targeting is not that difficult because there's many ways to segment. You don't want to be randomly selecting the way you're going to segment. You want to make sure that the characteristics you use to segment is meaningful. So if I was to say, why don't I segment this class? Maybe I should not teach 200 students. Maybe those 200 students are not the same. So I could say, I teach the marketing major students, that's one class, and then the non-marketing major students is another class. I think that could make sense. Now you say, oh, why don't I do that for gender? I teach the men on one class and the women in another class. Well, you have divided the students, but I don't think gender has any meaning when you're teaching marketing. That's right. So segmenting is not about dividing because you know people are different and you may as well just divide them. Is you have to use the characteristics to divide which are meaningful. And that's what's difficult, is finding meaningful characteristics to divide. So if we think about the milk, and if we think about the fact that there are different milk, so you could say, why don't we make a milk for women? Is that an opportunity? Well, I don't know. Yeah, actually, a question. Making milk for women, is this an opportunity?
Maybe if it had higher amount of vitamin D or something for people with osteoporosis or developing or something.
So yes, so yeah, you're on the right track. So you have to say it in that way. You have to say, women have you know, like, I don't know what it is. 20% of women have osteoporosis due to a lack of vitamin C, vitamin D. And this is 2 times more than men, according to this research in 2021. So it's recent, it's sourced, and you have a percentage. Set like that, that's an opportunity for an idea, which is to make a milk for women. So an opportunity is not what you're going to do. So if you say, the opportunity is for us to make milk for women, that's not an opportunity because that's what you're going to do. How can we say it? Is women have osteoporosis? That's the opportunity. Women have osteoporosis, therefore they need more vitamin D and more calcium. Okay, so then let's make the idea of the product that would satisfy that gap, that problem. Rich people are like to consume things that are more fancy. Is there a rich people milk? There's none. So we could be making a rich people milk. Actually, maybe a milk for the woman. I don't know if that exists. A specific milk for women. I think there's a lot of milk that says that they have extra omega-3 and vitamin and all this. I don't know that they're focusing specifically on women. I think they're focusing on a broad group. So that's another opportunity for this class. Is I think if you were to look at women and women consumption of milk and older women maybe, and see what they do. Yes, I think Chong, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna kind of add to what you're saying about, you know, marketing milk towards women. Really, it's one of those things, like the benefits, like for women, what they need in terms of vitamins and supplements is like you're focusing vitamin D, as Chris mentioned, but also calcium, vitamin A. You know, those are already like a lot of them are marketed or like labeled on milk.
Yeah,
But
they're
the
all
thing-
labeled on milk. Yeah.
Right, but so there's really no added benefits to it, because really there's in terms of like the medical aspect of it, like calcium, vitamin A, there's a limit to how much the body can, process. And really, even with women, you can market, say, oh, there's no added this and that, but the reality of it is, like, from a medical standpoint, if you go to a doctor, they're going to tell you, yeah, you can consume as much or so much, or as exorbitant amount, but really your body can only take so much of it. So really it's really more of a negligible effect to you. It won't be very beneficial. So that aspect, I think, is kind of hard to market in a sense, the way I see it, because really, like you say, all these added benefits, but really the reality of it is, for the smart consumers or the knowledgeable consumers, they would say, oh, this is kind of bogus, because really they're not going to get any more benefit to it.
It's true, but do you think all the successful products are successful because there's a true element into it, and that bogus product don't succeed?
Oh, of course not. Of course not. The whole the whole point of marketing these certain qualities of the, for milk, for example, is to garner that particular identity, that need, like, to say, here, this is what makes them unique and stuff, the uniqueness of it. So I understand why they do it, but as a consumer, like the knowledgeable consumer, I would, I personally would look into it, like, hey, is this really true? I mean, come on.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So
yeah, and I totally agree with you. However, I think there's enough gender difference that it's possible that there is some people that would prefer to buy a milk that would be made specifically for them, because they will sort of discharge the responsibility to the trust of the brand making the product. So what I'm trying to say is that, it reminds me of some shoes that you see sometimes, being any brand, and you see the sole. The sole of the shoe is, it's called turbo sole, and then it's called turbo XL, then triple XL turbo, and then the booster turbo triple XL 3, super great. And then you see the sole at the end, and there's so much sole, and then you speak to a professional athlete and they tell you, oh, I will never buy that shoe. And you go, but that's like the last shoe made by Nike, and it's got this sole plus that sole. He says, no, we, the athletes, professional athletes, we have almost no sole on our shoe, because with all that sole, that slows you down. And then you go, what? But I thought that was the point, is that the more sole you have, the faster you go. Well, that's what they tell you to, because you don't know, you're not a professional runner. If you're a professional runner, you don't buy those brands and you don't buy those soles, because this is gimmicky. And so I think I don't want to be giving too many examples here, because I don't want to be misinterpreted, but there's not one product category where there's not something that is bogus and yet very successful. But I can envision someone making a milk where there would be a real, but there would be some, I envision the product, I envision the opportunity, but I'm not 100% sure they will work, because a little bit of research will have to be done to sort of minimize the risk that sounds good, but it would never work. But maybe a bottle that would have maybe information that would say, these cows are harvested in a farm where the farm is woman-owned, where most of the staff are women, and the design of the bottle was done by women, and this is supervised by veterinarians who are women, and the bottle has a shape that is more of a, I don't know, appealing to a woman, and it has a lot of pink on it, and there will be a lot of verbiage and information that would be using just noticeable differences, which will be interesting for women, and it would be talking about osteoporosis, maybe even like a milk. They would say, you know, like this is your milk from 20 to 36, and this is 37 to, and because it would have different cocktail of different vitamins inside, that would make, I'm not saying all the women, but I would be surprised that there would not be a group of women that would sort of want this supervision in the milk and be interested in having sort of this being handled by a big corporation that would have all kinds of certification and all this, and it would be this milk really is helping women from young to get old or whatever. Anyway, Leslie, you have a question.
Oh, I was just gonna ask you because I went on the A2 Milk website and I didn't see any baby formula listed on there. However, I did see that there's baby formula that is made with it says A2. So I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
Yeah, you're right. So I thought of this, and I did find, but I don't know, it's in the US. I did find that they had baby formula milk as well. And the problem with baby formula milk, yeah, is, so I found it, I think they make it, but I don't know that they sell it already in the US.
No, they only sell it in China and in Australia from
Yeah,
what I was
okay,
looking
so
at.
that's, yeah, so that's what I saw. And yeah, so if you see something with this, then it's good. I don't see anything that they could be doing with that baby formula. Unless you find that there is some opportunity that sort of not being, that's changed and has not been taken advantage of, but I haven't seen anything.
Oh, it was just I was just curious because I was looking at an article that said that Nestle launched an A2 baby formula.
Oh, they did launch a A2 baby formula?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep looking into it, but that's why I wanted to see if you knew anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's kind of a little rough because, I mean, that's the name of the company. So if, I'm just curious to see how they call it. Hopefully they don't use the word A2 inside the brand from Nestle, but Nestle is such a big company that maybe they can get away with using the word A2. Or maybe A2 is a generic term and therefore A2 milk is not protected to be using it. I don't know. So yes, keep looking into that. That could be something interesting. Maybe there's nothing in there, or at least that you can find. So keep your eyes and look for these opportunities. Yes, Chong, I see you have your hand up.
I just want to answer your question. First off, Professor, with A2 milk, I don't think it is trademarked because Costco actually, they have their own line of A2 milk. I just found that out. I was like shopping at Costco. Yeah, so I think a lot of, I actually ended up buying the A2 milk and I tried it out, A2 Milk Company. I think that name itself, A2 Milk Company, is a trademark. So they can actually, that's licensed on their own. But yeah, also, I was gonna also say that, you know, your viewpoint of actually marketing for women's milk as, you know, women owned, women, such and such, hiring is actually a great path or a great viewpoint or a great pathway in terms of marketing a milk for, I guess, for the for women, I guess, but there is some, what was I gonna say? There is, I think there's some, well, actually, I forgot what I was going to say about that one, but yeah, so yeah, that's all I want to say about the A2 milk.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this, because these are important elements that everyone needs to find out, is what is going on, and that shows that there is therefore growth within the concept of A2 for the milk, and it's even possible that A2 milk was not the first doing it, but they are the one that really got the most growth from it. And now the question is, how can they capitalize on it? Not to lose it, because once you have Costco that put their hand into something like this, usually what happens is the price go down. Costco has such a powerful purchasing power that they buy in such a large volume at once from one producer that they are able to get prices really, really way down. And therefore, that's why I think the A2 milk need to take advantage of the fact that they were at the beginning And I think they should take advantage of the fact that they should create more authenticity and more specialty, because I mean, Costco does many things, and therefore they should be not specialized in milk. There should be a good price for getting good milk, but A2 milk should be the place you go because that's all they do, milk, and they don't want to be missing the opportunity of being perceived as the one that came up with this this product. But how do they grow from where they are now, and what do they need to do in order to be perceived as more appropriate? I was able during the break to go check Leslie Velasquez link about the A2 baby formula, and that's amazing. Yeah, so there's definitely a trend going for those A2 type of milk. Obviously, they don't. I couldn't see that they're using the name A2 inside the brand. It's part of the formula and the benefit and features of the product to have some of these A2 protein. Very interesting, and it's obviously very interesting that they are marketing this to the baby, because if they market this to the baby, it's likely that it's going to have an impact on the parents and maybe those people when they going to get older, looking for this A2 type of milk. Yes, Sean.
Yes, Professor. Now I remember what I was going to actually I mentioned earlier. The one thing with milk and marketing, I guess, like to women with all these added like benefits with like the the minerals, vitamins and stuff, and even the babies as well too. Isn't there any concern of like the kind of a detrimental effect in terms of marketing with like possibility of like genetic modification, GMO type situations, or people, because that's very counterintuitive to market some, hey, we have all these benefits to the milk and stuff that could be geared towards helping babies or women and who are pregnant, but also like, but wouldn't that kind of like also kind of possibly ring a bell like, oh, how are they doing this? Isn't it genetically modified and stuff? Wouldn't that be kind of bad?
Well, you see maybe it's bad, maybe it's not bad, or maybe it's just exactly the same. While you're speaking, I was thinking of this brand called Luna Bar. Mm-hmm. And Luna Bar is a protein, which is just another one of the thousands of protein bar that was created as a bar for women.
Right.
So if one can imagine that someone can create a bar that is for women, I think one can imagine that in the same way, someone could create a milk that is better for women. Now, the betterment, can be that, I remember this student I had in my class. That was maybe 8 years ago. He came to see me at the end of the class and he said, "Hey, professor, I'm not a chemist, a nutritionist, or anything, but I want to start a business. I have this great idea." And I said, "What is it?" He said, everybody wants probiotics. They want probiotics in their drink, in their food. They want probiotics in their milk and the yogurt and all that. And I read an article. So that's why he said it to me. I read an article that said that all these probiotics don't work. Yet the probiotic business are going up by 500%. I said, well, how interesting. You see, you could be selling something, doesn't really work, but everybody wants it. Perfect. Well, the question is, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as much as people dream it work. It doesn't work at all. There's a variation. Sometimes it works enough that it's worth still taking that versus the one that doesn't work at all. So there's a small benefit. And then the students, I told him, "But what you want to do?" So then he said, "I found that if you take probiotics just by themselves, you get 90% of the probiotic. The problem is then when they produce it at the same time as they put it inside the bottle, the probiotic, every week, the benefit of the probiotic goes away. So let's say you buy apple juice And at the time when they make the bottle, they put some probiotic inside, and then you get this apple juice with more probiotic. Is it better than apple juice that had no probiotic? And that's the point. It's better. The question is how much better it is. And that's why you need to be an expert to be able to say how much better it is. It's better, but maybe it's better by 0.00001%. So you can't say it's not better, but it's not substantial. So I don't know. But as a consumer, you just say apple juice with no probiotic and apple juice with probiotic. Even if it's not working very well, there's still some. And then he said, what would be perfect is to sell the apple juice and sell the probiotic on the side. And people was actually to take the probiotic and the apple juice. That would be the best world, because it's when the probiotic is in contact with the apple juice that you lose 70%. Don't quote me on the number, but you lose a large number of the probiotics. And then the student said, I had this idea that the probiotics, you put them inside the cap. And when you open the cap, there's like a safety. But at one time, you break the safety. And the second time is you break the probiotics and they fall inside the juice. So then, instead of getting 90% as if you're taking the pill on the apple juice, you simplify, because that's what people want. They don't want water and vitamin, they want vitamin water. It's a one step. So here you do the one step, but you don't lose 50% or 70% because it's been in the apple juice for already a week, a month, 6 months or whatever. The fact that it just falls as the moment where you consume it, you get many more probiotic. And he says, that's my startup, is to have this special cap. And then he said, I'm not going to invent the cap. I already found a cap that does this for some other application, not for probiotic, for some other application. So what I'm going to do is use an existing cap, use the existing engineering, and then put some probiotic where they had something else before, and then put it in apple juice. That's what people want. They want cider or whatever they want. And then they twist the top and they get the benefit. And I told him this was a great idea, blah, 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 blah. And then there was another investor pitch that was going on. I think that was the first one for the Bull Run, it's called. It's another one that CSUN has started maybe, like I said, 8 years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I told my students, you should go to that competition. So then he went, he did the first run, the second run, the fourth run, he went to the final and he won. He won, I think now it's quite a lot of money, but back then it was maybe $10,000 or whatever. So he got $10,000 from CSUN, from the Nazarian College, for his ID on this probiotic capsules. I don't know if he was able to go further with it. The hardest thing is not to find the opportunity or the idea and to even pitch it and get $10,000. The hardest thing is to actually get a business rolling from this, even though it's great, because this business is the hardest thing, one of the hardest thing in life, running a business. And so I don't know how far he went with it, but it was sort of the same idea where you could think of ways to improve. So could there be an A2 milk where your idea is to increase something in the A2 milk, where in fact the people could use the packaging, and there could be a design packaging, there could be a something that you do that will increase whatever vitamins and minerals and calcium at the moment, where people will really see the benefit of them consuming this product, because there's an obvious gain. So some food for ideas, that's what marketing is about, is finding this problem, finding the solution, thinking about the method, thinking about the process, thinking about the product. All of this is what I find super exciting. And that's what I find that it's worth sleeping in your office, because I love it. But some people, they don't like this, because there is processes, there is stress, there is, creativity, there is thinking of the strategies, there is research, there is finding money, there's all of this. And it's not everything is for sure, but that's what marketing is about. Do you have any comments or ideas from talking about this?
No, Professor.
Okay, excellent. So we keep on moving. So how do you break consumers into groups? You use these characteristics. Each one of them makes different customers. The idea is to understand that not everybody is the right customer for you. There's lots of customers, and there's a small group that is really good for you, and there's a large group that is not good for you. It's the concept of 80-20 or the 20-80 rule, which is that 20% of the people are going to generate 80% of the profits. So you want to try to break down people by using characteristics that you think are going to be more, so they call salient, more important, more relevant, more valid for the people you're focusing on. So I was saying, if I was to teach this class, one salient important characteristic would be what is their major. Another important characteristics you could say is maybe do they work or they don't work, because that brings different level of experience and different way of teaching the class. What is their GPA? Students with different GPA have also different motivation and objectives. That would be relevant. Talking about their height is irrelevant, their gender is irrelevant, their ethnicity is irrelevant. Could you divide people based on their ethnicity? I guess you could. Is it always relevant? I don't think it is. Therefore, you want to use the right characteristics for the right type of product that you're selling, because it makes a difference between the people. So segmentation, much more difficult than targeting. When you segment, you want to have some value in the segments. The first one is called measurable. Measurable means you need to make sure you can assess in terms of numbers how many these segments are. So if you use men and women, you can assess that there is 55% women and 45% men that consume this particular category of product, because you can find some statistics. Accessible means that they can be reached. So either they live in a certain area where they go consume in certain stores, or they use a certain access to the internet, so they can be contacted, they can be communicated. Substantial means that the problem of segmenting, so the benefit of segmenting is by dividing people, you become more specific to certain people and not trying to focus on everybody at the same time. However, the more you segment, the more you add characteristics, the smaller the market. So if you say, I'm going to say sell A2 milk to women, so suddenly you cut 50% of the population. Then you say using age over 70 years old. Now you cut off 90%, maybe not, 85% of the women population, and then who are still working. So then you cut off again 90% of that population. The more you add characteristics, the smaller the group. Therefore, you want to use segment characteristics for segmenting that are really relevant and salient. The idea is too few, you're not specific enough to a certain group, and too many is you become micro-segmented, which would be very good for that group that you're micro-segmenting. But at the same time, it's not going to be substantial, it's very likely that your business is not going to make much money because you're focusing on too few people. Differential means, it's again related to everything else before, that there is a true difference between these people. So you don't want to divide people that if you were to sell this product, it would not make much difference. So you're selling potato chips and you're saying age as a characteristics. Different age definitely eat potato chips in a different way. You're saying gender, and then gender, you find that people of different gender also eat potato chips in a different way. Then you say location, Northern California versus Southern California. And yes, there's a difference on how they eat potato chips, but it's really small. It's so small that it's not really worth taking that geographic segmentation characteristics, because it doesn't generate enough difference. So you want to, it's almost like a rule of thumb. How many characters did you want? Let's say 5 maximum. So you pick the best 5 one, the one that generate the most interest, the more accessibility, substantial, and differences. And then the final one is actionable, which means that it's not a hypothetical difference, and it's not a difference that it hasn't occurred yet. It's in the future. So you can do it now and people want it now. So if you were to do, separate people in terms of their interest for protein, and you did this maybe 3 or 5 years ago, it would not be actionable. But now this concept of protein is becoming more known by people. I don't think it's a mass known fact, but it's growing. If Costco is starting to do it, if Nestle is starting to do it for baby formula and all that, it's becoming more common, and therefore it's becoming more actionable as a characteristic for looking at dividing people into segments. The next thing is therefore T. So like I said before, S has to be done always first. So it has to always be S and T. It could be PST or STP. STP is the best one, and it's the one that I recommend, and that the textbook is recommending, and every professor in the world, in every country, will recommend is S, T, and P. Why? Because you need to know who are the customers before you define what is going to be your identity. P is defining the identity of the brand. So it should be, who are the customers? What do they want? Based on what they want, let's create an identity to the people, versus let's create an identity for our company, and then let's see who cares about what our identity is. Unfortunately, the way it should be done is STP, from the consumer to then thinking about what we should be about. That's how it should be done. However, most of the time it's done as, here's the identity, and then who cares of our identity. If I had to put a percentage, I would say that 85% of the time, it's PST, the world we live in. 85 or more % of the time. So the most common way people do it is PST, but that's the wrong way. The right way for 99% of the situation is STP. So when could it be wrong to think about the consumer and then to think, to think about the image and identity of the brand and the company first, when that should be correct? That should be correct if your company has a lot of creativity. I feel like saying artistry involved. So, for example, you are a musician. Should you try to make the music and play the role of the singer and the band that people want? Or should you create the music that you like and eventually get people to find out about your music and then like it, because there is sort of talent in this? So as an artist, that's what you hope to do. You're a painter, it's the same. However, if you want to increase the likelihood of being successful, you still have to do STP, which means that you still have to think about what the customer wants. So I think the more correct way is probably PSTP. So that's not in the textbook. It's not even on Google. It's not even in YouTube. It's not even anywhere. Because what you will find is that people teach you about STP, which is what you're supposed to do. But since the reality is that's what people do, let's be realistic. So what should we do in the real world? In the real world, it's very difficult to run a business and not think about who is the owner and the image of the owner, and not think about what people that are running this business want to do. That's sort of the corporate culture. So P is always there. It's the corporate culture. And this corporate culture does things. And these things that they do eventually needs to be sold to consumers. So PST, And then I think now that you've tried to do it, you make an adjustment, PSP, and then you try to adapt. So what is T before we further talk about positioning? T is, now that you've understood who are your customers, the different characteristics that they have, then you're going to look at grouping them, which means that you take several of the characteristics, like I said, 4, 5, that you group together. Here again, it's important to see that this grouping need to make a large target enough. So you don't want something too small. You want something also that is growing. You want to think about your strengths and weaknesses and how you can serve the specific targets based on your knowledge and skills for what they want, the features, benefits that they want. And you want to think about your competitors, what kind of strengths they have and who they are already serving. Because sometimes it's not good to try to be everybody serving the same consumers. And it's good also to sometimes to look at other consumers that have not been served, but yet are a good group of consumers that deserve attention. There are 3 methods of targeting. So the textbook, the world unfortunately uses the term strategy. So they say there's 3 targeting strategies. The word strategy here is overused. So I'm going to try to tell you that's what the people say, but it's overused because they're not real strategies, they're just methods. The first method is called undifferentiated targeting, where you sell to everyone. So that one, obviously, is the easiest one, is everybody is the same, let's make one product for everybody. So it's like Coca-Cola for everybody. Then the next one is concentrated targeting strategy method. And there is, you find that there are multiple target characteristics. Then you group them, you make targets, and then you find that there are 3 targets that you could sell the product to because they are not too different. So there's a combination of targets. This combination of targets is called concentrated. And then the last one is differentiated, where you find that the targets are too different, too specific, that you'll have to create a product for each one of them. So if you're a small business, what should you do? You should do most of the time, almost always, differentiated, which means that you make one product for one target, which is a combination of segments, characteristics. And if you're a large company, you should try, you can do that, but you be better off because your power is in the large production and large distribution, and therefore you want to be more in the concentrated targeting strategies. So let's look for some examples. You make some breakfast cereal, sell them to different people. So you can sell them to kids, to adults, and therefore you're going to try to create different images. These different images, different combination and different features of the product are going to be focused on specific groups. So you can see Fruit Loops here from this design is specifically focusing on kids. So positioning, what is this? So I started explaining it. Positioning is actually one of the most complicated subjects in marketing because it requires a lot of creativity and at the same time a lot of research. So it's very objective, subjective, and the combination of the both. The idea is people have some image, some meaning about the brand from companies. And positioning is therefore, what do we want to be known for? So it's like, what is the first objective word statement that comes when you hear of a brand? So you hear Apple, what do you think? Versus you hear BMW, what do you think? Versus you hear Costco, what do you think? Each one of these brands have a certain image, like a slogan, like a meaning, and that's the positioning, which is the special place people remember a brand, the special meaning that is remembered for a brand. So positioning, there's 2 maps. how do you explain positioning is through a map. There's the perceptual map, which is the positioning as seen as through the eye of the consumer, versus the positioning map, which is the positioning from the eye of the marketers. So the marketers, they have this wish of being perceived as, for their brand, as quality engineering. But then when they ask the consumer, is the consumer see it as a lower quality engineering. So therefore, there is a disparity between what the marketers want their brand to be positioned and what the brand is actually being positioned. So here's an example of different hotels from the same company, from Fairfield Inn to Marriott Marquis. This used two positioning attributes, price and quality, higher, lower, price and quality. And therefore, the marketers will place the brand, as you can see it on this matrix. But what is the perceptual map? The perceptual map may be different. They may see Fairfield Inn as being more expensive than they're supposed to be, or being maybe they see the Marriott as being lower quality than the marketers perceive. So how do you change people perceive quality and their perception of the positioning and all this? You do this by first communication. So communication doesn't have to be objective. It's just repetition that makes people believe something. The more you repeat something, the more they believe it's true. So you can improve people perception of quality by having a repetition of message of quality. But that's not really good, because eventually they may realize that they've been just brainwashed and the quality is not really better. It's just that everyone has been made believe, because this company has, let's say, a lot of means so they can make them believe it's quality. The next thing you can do is improve what's perceived as the defects of quality, or the lower element of quality on the product, by improving these. And again, it's not a question that you ask to the engineers, it's a question that you ask to the consumers. The consumers define what's lower quality and what would make it higher quality. And then you take those definitions from the consumers, and then you give it to the engineers, for the engineers to reflect what was not so good inside the product as perceived by the consumer. And then you give it back to the consumer and see if the engineers made a good translation of what the consumers wanted to see in the product to make it better. So here's a perceptual map. So again, perceptual is from the consumer eyes versus positioning is from the marketer eyes. You see several attributes. So to the top is some prestige and pride of ownership. To the bottom is it's more economical and practical. To the left is it's conservative and for all people. And to the right is for younger people and more sporty looking. So in this situation here, you have multiple attributes, essentially two with extremes, and then you start placing the brands. So the consumer places the brands. So they'll place Porsche at the top right versus Plymouth at the bottom left. So that's where the consumer wants to see these. And again, this does not have to be like an exam where there's only one answer. This is in the eye of the target. So you could say, we expect the man to see Porsche as lower than the woman in terms of as a touch of class. If that's what you expect and what you want, and therefore you want to test to see if that's what the consumer perceives as well. And if that's what they perceive, then it's fine. There's no right or wrong. It's just what they perceive and what you want them to perceive. And you only work for this gap. Then you can see that there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 number. And so that is where you see your targets, for example. So you'll have 5 targets. Young men, educated and poor. Then you'll have old women, rich and uneducated. And then you'll have wealthy people that live on the East Coast, something like this. And so that ends up being the 5 targets that are very important. At that time, you may say, you know what, we want to focus just on 1, and that's differentiated. No, we want to focus on 3, and that's concentrated. What's interesting is the size of these. So the largest size is the blue number 1, and you can see that Chevrolet is sitting right on the biggest size. Then you also see that Toyota sits between 2. So they sort of, you could almost say that Chevrolet has a probably a differentiated targeting strategy, because they're very focused on serving the biggest group and being right in the middle, versus Toyota is more concentrated because they will be focusing in between several groups. So they don't sit on a big one, because Toyota could have taken number 2, or could have put themselves in between 1 and 2, and therefore would be not perfect on 1, not perfect on 2, but it would be better than Chevrolet on number 2, where Chevrolet would be very far from number 2. So it's this concept of positioning is extremely important, because it goes with segmentation and targeting, and it goes with the strategy of the company. So you do some analysis of where you need to be, you do some analysis where the consumer wants you to be, and then where your competitors are, and that allows you to get a better sense of what are your next evolution. So this slide summarizes what I just said for the past 30 minutes or more, that talks about what is therefore segmentation, targeting, and positioning. It's 3 stages, where the first stage is about separating and developing some segments. The second stage, targeting, is about developing some evaluation of the segments, and then grouping the segments. So that's number 4, you group them. So then once the segments are grouped, what do you have? You have targets. Segments are individual elements, and targets are combination of these elements. The more elements you combine, the more you become micro-segmented, and therefore micro-segmentation, I'm not saying it's always bad, but it tends to be difficult for the most situation. When do you want to be micro-segmented? When you have a market that is very saturated of competitors. So you want to micro-segment by focusing more closely on specific group of consumers. And the more and more closely you get to them, the more and more they will be satisfied with you, and the more and more you can gain some market share and be able to survive. Then the third stage is positioning. Once you've done your segmentation and your targeting in that order, there's no choices, then you are able to define what are the image that consumers want us to have. You see, when you do the targeting, is you think specifically about a group and groups of people and what they want. And they want many things. And when you do positioning, you cannot have all of these things together. So you have to think about one. So now if we go back to 2007, when the client for the class was CSUN. In 2007, the president of CSUN asked this class not to take an external client, but to take CSUN. And they told us that we need to work on the STP, and in particular on the P, the positioning. In 2007, CSUN had 17 attributes of positioning. What's the problem of having 17 attributes of positioning? It's like if my daughter came and she said, oh, I have a boyfriend and he's amazing, and he's great at 17 things. He's the best at 17 things. What would be the problem? Is the most intelligent, is the most beautiful, is the most funny, is the most charming. I mean, if you have the most at 17 things, is there a problem? There's a problem, because there's nobody that can be the most at 17 things. It's not possible. It's not human. So then what's the right number for a human? Really, this I don't know. but it's 17 is too many things. So CSUN could not be the best at doing 17 things. 17, no university can have 17. If you look at all the universities, they will tell you they are the best at 1, maybe 2, maximum 3. But 80% will tell you 1 or 2. So a university, therefore, has to have 1 or 2. So we looked at the 17 and we tried to rank them from which one is the most important to the least important of the 17. And then that was easy, is we knew that the best we could do is take the top 3. But then that's not exactly how you do it. Is you look within the 17 if there is a theme, because sometimes there's several, you know, if someone is attractive, charming, beautiful, good looking, that's physical. So it's like great physics, that would be 1. You can summarize it into 1. So the same thing here is you want to summarize all of the 17 in a group. And that's why in 2007, in this class, we created the first slogan and positioning of CSUN, which was called CSUN Shine. And therefore the positioning was shining. Shining students, shining place, shining professors, shining IDs, right? And then in 2013, they hired a consulting firm and they paid lots of money to get this consulting firm to review and maybe change the positioning. And since, you know, they were paid to do something, they had to do something, and they came up with a new slogan, which was CSUN Rise. Rising students, rising professors, and all this. And so, which was good because CSUN, therefore, has decided to use only 1. And that's most of the time, that's better. But you see that they had the illusion that they could use 17. Nobody can use more than 3. And so more than 5, more than 10, more than 17, it was crazy. They therefore didn't understand what was positioning. Positioning, it's like what you've boiled down the essence of the image of a business. Okay, it's the art. It's the one thing that you need to remember. One thing that is different. Okay, so if imagine some data, and you're looking at your customers, and you review the data, and you come up with this map. There's all kinds of. Imagine these are 100,000 each, and so these are your customers, and so they're scattered like this. What you do is you say, okay, we have multiple customers, and I don't know how many there are here, but let's say 25 segments. There's 25 segments. So what do you want to do then? You want to try to find some targets, because you're not going to sell to 25 segments. You're going to sell to 1, 2, 3 combination of targets. So that's what you do, is then you look at the segments and see if they have a common trait. So you find that the common trait maybe is their income. Maybe it's their interest. Maybe it's the number of time that they use. You have the people that use once a week, the people that use once a day, and then there's people that never, they use more than once a day. So you have 3 groups. And you have different income and all this. So then you get 3 groups when you start plotting the data using specific characteristics. But when you look at these, you can further divide again by adding 1 more characteristics. It's maybe East Coast, West Coast. It may be other characteristic is age, older, younger. And so segmenting and targeting is therefore to constantly look at your customers and try to see what's unique about them. So that's why segmenting and targeting can be strategically very disruptive, because you could be looking at the market and identify a new group of customers, people that want something different. So people want milk, they want calcium, then they find that the milk is not super high quality, so then they go towards more vegetarian type of milk using grain in order to make it. And then you come back and find that they're not so happy with this, and maybe they want to go back to the cows, but the cow is giving them problem of digestion, and you find then there's the solution of the protein, and then you come back with the protein and you want to sell it to who? So you sell it to older people maybe, or younger people, but maybe the age is not sufficient. Maybe there's an income, and that's why I was talking about income segmentation will be the opportunity where there's certain group of people that are used to spend so much money for everything they consume that they are not consuming milk anymore because they are looking for something much more prestigious, much more unique, much more exclusive, because they have higher standards in everything they buy. Here's another graph that I think is, well, it's in Canvas. If you go in the file, if you go in the tips, this it's not new. It's the same, this and that, but in this situation, I use names. So segmentation is on the left side in the yellow column, and segmentation is you divide. So divide by what? By age, by benefits, by usage, by loyalty, by personality. So you divide. And inside age, you could have 4 group of age, you could have 20 group of age, you could have 2 group of age, young and old. It doesn't matter, but you just divide. The more you divide, the larger your population needs to be. Otherwise, you end up with 2 clients at the end. Once you made this division, you think about the grouping of these. So that's why I have these arrows that point, and they are different elements, characteristics of the yellow column are assembled in the blue column. So the blue column has a different composition, combination. And then this combination makes different targets. Could you have more targets? Yes, you could, but then there's more combination than those 4 targets. These are just 4. Then what you do is you give a name to these targets. The warrior, the cheapo, the busy bee, the chicabella. They're just a name that's sort of representing the type of customer that this target is. So that's why if you go on the internet, or if tomorrow you go to work, you will see that sometimes businesses don't call them targets, they call them personas. So we target personas, or personas are target. It's the same thing. It's a synonym. It's just that personas are the sort of the more current, the newer term in order to talk about targeting. But you don't want to be confused. It's the same. Okay. So persona, what's interesting about persona is it's a little bit less academic, and it's a little bit simplified. And oftentimes they don't use so many words, but they use pictures. And they use pictures in order to describe the customer. Instead of saying this one is old and this one is new, is the picture is sort of supposed to be the stereotype of the customer. So I recommend to use personas because it's more, common to be using personas when you talk about the targets. And I recommend to use these ideas of using pictures in order to describe the customer. And then these targets are therefore aligning with the positioning. So if you have a strategy that consists in being differentiated, you're not going to combine the target, and therefore you're going to have a positioning for each one of the targets. If you combine the targets, you could say of those 4 targets, there's 3 that we're going to combine, then you just need to have 1 positioning. So that's why, unfortunately, differentiated targeting strategy is the most appropriate for smaller business, but it's also the most expensive, which is sort of defeats the purpose. When you're a small business, you usually have less resources, and therefore you wish you could take a method which would be cheaper. But the cheapest one is, undifferentiated, where you don't have targeting and personas and all that. But that one, in the world we live in right now, almost does not exist anymore. So you have to be either concentrated or differentiated. And therefore it's easier to be differentiated if you're a small business, because you really want to be as specific as you can to a specific target, but therefore you cannot be making too many products because that's more expensive to do it this way. So a small business will tend to have 4, 5, 6 new products with fewer targets And a big business will have many more products with concentrated targeting strategies. So there are more products covering more population, if you want. Here's another table, which is again the same thing. So what the slide I show you sort of evolves, but this time we're talking about sort of using the persona, but I don't have the picture, but it's using again the persona by showing multiple characteristics to divide people. So the characteristics again are on the left side. Inside the green column is the question of benefits, question of the age, then some behavior, then some favorite brand, some personality, and some lifestyle. And what you end up with is 4 groups, again, with each one their name. That's the blue rectangles at the top. So you have the sensory segment, the sociable, the warriors, and dependent segment. And they say this is for toothpaste. So you work for Colgate and you had to do a STP. So you're looking at the customers by looking at their characteristics of segmentation and then developing these into this table. And by doing this, you're able to find the targets. So you could say, we're going to develop 1 new toothpaste for 1 new group, the sociable. And so what do we know about the sociable? They care about the teeth being very white. They tend to be younger people. They tend to smoke. And you have this column here, which is an explanation of what these people are. So that's extremely important because that's how you divide people. Some examples. This was Johnny Walker, and they created a new product which was called White Walker. And they created this White Walker as a limited edition for the people that like the program Game of Thrones. So how did they segment? They segment by interest and hobby and lifestyle of liking a TV program, right? So imagine this. This was not so much in the characteristics, you know, liking a TV programs. So here you see age, benefits. So you can be very creative. If they like Game of Thrones, we're going to make a game. So there's enough people that like Game of Thrones that Johnny Walker created a whiskey for the people that like Game of Thrones. That's show you the power and the popularity of this program. Then Johnny Walker had a slogan, and it was more like a campaign, which was called Keep Walking. It's for the people that are leaders, the people that take initiatives, the people that are entrepreneurials, the people that are busy. So that was the Keep Walking campaign. And then they created the Johnny Walker. So suddenly it's a whiskey for women. You know, it's like there's whiskeys and there's whiskey for women, just women. So it was called the Johnny Walker. It's still for sale, the Johnny Walker whiskey, the whiskey for women. So we're talking about, could it be crazy to have a milk for women? Maybe not, since there is such a thing as a whiskey for women. Now, this is an interesting thing. Is when I was a student in the early 90s, working on marketing, we had an assignment which was to think about Gillette Sensor 2. Back then, they were selling the black one here that you see. Gillette Sensor 2, 2 blades, and the project, like you have A2 milk, my project was Gillette Sensor 2. And so what was interesting is that the professor was expecting us to talk about Gillette Sensor 3, which was to essentially add another blade and call it Gillette Sensor 3, and explain that there were people that wanted to spend more money. They were more educated, more sophisticated. They live in bigger houses, in big city and so forth. And they were like more fancy, and they wanted a third blade, right? And so if you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blades, Gillette even went all the way to have 5 blades. But I mean, 5 blades, that's when you start cutting yourself, I guess. There's too many blades. But when I did this project, I knew the instructor wanted me to add a third blade. That's just the way I've always been, is I started identifying in the market by looking at research and reading magazines and all that, that more and more women, so this was in 92, I think, more and more women were using the men's shavers. So they were using the Gillette Sensor 2. And more were using it. And right away I thought, but why don't we make a razor for women? So I wrote my, like you're writing a 10 pages report, I wrote my 10 pages report about the fact that women were borrowing their boyfriend blade shaver. And therefore women, you know, they sort of have a different shape and they're shaving different, whatever they're shaving is sort of very different than someone's face and all of this. And therefore there was a business for Gillette to make women shaver. Well, the professor gave me like a C. I got a C. Because this professor did not see that this was the future. The reality is it was, but it was too soon. And the woman shaver, obviously, no, it's huge. It's probably 50%. I don't know for a fact, but I would imagine it's a large number of sales of Gillette. And they gave it a name, which back then I didn't think of, but it's very obvious. They couldn't call it Gillette Sensor XL Turbo. You know, they had to give it a name, and Venus makes total sense. And they also changed the shape of the shaver. So there's the slight little nuances to the shaver for the woman version, in the angle, in the handle. I mean, it's very subtle, but it totally makes sense. It was so obvious to me. That professor didn't see it because I don't know why. I can imagine why, but that's a different subject for a different day. Now the world is constantly thinking in terms of STP, and that's what I want to show you. If you are a member of the Porsche Club of America, it's like the biggest car club in the world. And the biggest one is Porsche, and the biggest one is in America. It's like 130,000 members. These people are constantly changing. And what do? Is they sell their car online themselves. They use eBay. They use Bring a Trailer. They use all kinds of new technology that allows people to sell their car themselves without having to put an ad in a magazine, which is the old-fashioned way, or using a broker. So Porsche Club of America, with 130,000 members, obviously, they let you put ads inside the PDF magazine or even the printed magazine. But what don't they think about their customers? Add more benefit by creating an online auction. And so that's what they did, is they created their own online auction about a year ago. Now, I was thinking, if you are like a person and you're trying to, I call him Average Joe, trying to buy a gun, where do you go? Average Joe, you go to Big Five. Now, if you Bob and Sue, where do you go? Maybe you go to a gun store. It's a little bit more advanced than Big Five. You go to Turner's. You go to a large gun store in your area. If you're a person that works for security, where do you go? You go directly to the website of some famous gun maker, because that's their profession, and therefore it's a B2B. They know about what they want and the type of jobs that they have to do, and then you go there and you buy it. If you're the police, where do you go buy? Well, it's business to business, it's a contract. So you directly contact the factory and you do what I was talking about before. There's consumer behaviors, there's more stages, and they're looking at who are the suppliers, they make a bid, people do a bid, they review the bids and all of this. And so different customers, different suppliers, different needs. And that's the world that we live in. And that's what you need to think about. There's milk and there's different people that want it. And that's why we already had this conversation. There's the baby, there's the woman, maybe there's the older people, maybe there's some other groups. So the opportunity could come from some other groups. And I thought that was quite amazing. If you are a terrorist, a Taliban, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, whatever, where do you go and buy? Is there a store? Is there such a thing as a store for terrorists? And in fact, I found it. It's called Excalibur Army. And it's a company. You can find it on the internet. It's very easy to find, in fact. It's a company that's specialized in selling large quantity of weapons. So this is not for the police or for individuals. This is for state, a large organization, that are about to buy for 200 million, 300 million of weapons. So you can actually go to their website and you can see the kind of tank that they offer. And you click on the tank and you make your deposit, and then they send you 400 tanks or whatever. It's incredible to know that all of these things exist. And so every industry you're in, that's how you think. You think in terms of, what do I make? What does the market has in terms of consumers? And which consumers do I want to take care of? I can't take care of all the consumers. I can only take care of certain consumers. And so who can I focus on? Okay. Any questions? So how should you work on your quiz? You should download the quiz review. And the quiz review is going to give you like 60 slides. There's going to be 50 questions, 50 multiple choice questions. And so those 60 slides are sort of summary of the class and to get you ready to go do the exam. However, studying just a review slide is not going to be enough. What you want to do is to read the textbook for the different subjects. So the different subjects are written here, and they're also written in the quiz review. At the beginning of the quiz review, it tells you the different subjects. Those different subjects, like we talked at the beginning of the year, are pretty much lined up for most textbook. The 99, 98% of your textbook looks like that, no matter if it's 10 years old, from the US or from somewhere else, as long as it's from the author I indicated in the syllabus, Cutler and Armstrong. And you read those textbooks. Once you read your textbook, you go to the quiz review. So you don't learn from the quiz review and then take the quiz. You read the textbook, then look at the quiz review, and whatever in the quiz review you do not understand, or you don't, from the summary, you don't remember, or you feel unfamiliar, then you make sure you write it down, and then go in the textbook and study it in the textbook until everything in the quiz review seems very familiar. If everything seems familiar, if everything seems that you know it and that you're not confused by it, you could explain it to someone else, then that means you're ready for the quiz. That's the method I've used for over 20 years, 22 years at CSUN, and it has worked extremely well. Not a little bit, it worked extremely well. And over 12,000 students, it has worked very well. When it doesn't work well? It doesn't work well when the students are only studying from the quiz review, because it's just a summary. That doesn't work well because you're going to miss a lot of the details. And my questions, some of them will be detailed, and if you didn't read the textbook, therefore it's going to be too specific, and the quiz review is not going to give you the details, obviously, because it's only 60 slides. And when you're going to look at your textbook, you're going to see that this is like 250 pages already. So it could not be covering the same thing by 60 summary slides. But if you read the textbook and then go back to the slide, that's when it should be working for you. And the quiz will be in Canvas.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.